started happening here that made you feel something paranormal was going on?
Well, we moved into the house almost exactly 4 years ago, a couple of days ago. And Finn, our oldest son, was about 8 months old when we moved in. And after, it was a great house. We fell in love with it. It's just like we had looked at a lot of other houses online, but the second we walked into the door at this house, we just knew that it was our house. It was just home. And we joked with the realtor about ghosts and whether or not we could return it if it turned out to be haunted. And the whole house was just wonderful except for this one corner in the basement, which had been closed off at one time with some paneling and some ugly fabric in the ceiling. And every place in the house had a really great vibe except for that one room. And you'd go down there and I thought, you know what, this is just one of the creepiest places I've ever been. I hated going down there, and one of the very first things we did when we moved in was pull those walls down so it wasn't its own room anymore. So it kind of opened it up and it felt a little bit better. But when Finn was a baby, we started waking up in the morning and finding his crib door down. The door on his crib, you got to pinch it really hard. It's solid oak. It's really heavy. We never heard it bang down. We didn't, and I didn't think anything about it at first, but as it started to go on and it happened more and more often, you get to the point where you're like making mental notes. You're like, I know I put it up. I know I did. And then I got to the point that, I would make a mental note and I would click it, and it was kind of loud, so you always knew you were trying not to wake the baby up when you were shutting it. And there was one particular night that we read our stories and I put him down and I'm clicking it up and I'm thinking, don't wake up. And then I'm looking at it going, all right, you're up. I put you up. I know I put it up. And I went to bed and I woke up the next morning with the sound of a thud and Finn crying. Why don't we go to the boys' room first? Because that's where most of it started. This is the boys' room. Sorry, Dave.
No problem.
And this is the crib where the door would be let down a lot. And the reason I found it so interesting is you have to really squeeze it, lift up a little bit. And if it was, banging down, then it seems like we would hear something. But I also thought it was really interesting because after John and Brian and the guys started coming over that next week, the crib door was down like 3 times. And it never actually happened to Beckett. It hadn't happened since Finn was a baby, and we'd asked the room to stop. And then after we started this whole process of trying to figure out what we needed to do about the house, it started happening to the baby. So I go in, the door is down, and Finn has fallen out of the crib. So that was just kind of like the last straw, and I just turned around and looked at the room, and I'm like, okay, I know you want to see the baby, but you've hurt him, so you have to stop doing that to the crib. You can't do that to his crib door anymore. And we were working under the assumption then that maybe it was our neighbor's mom who had lived in this house before us. She passed away not in the home, but the boys' room was her bedroom. So we just kind of joked around that it must be Lucille. And I'm like, Lucille, leave the kids alone. You're hurting them. And it didn't happen anymore. So I'm like, well, good. It worked. I told her to stop, and she stopped, and now it's okay. And I think the same time this was going on, Steve was having some issues in the basement that he never really talked to me about, which I think is really interesting because through this whole process I found out things that had happened to him that he hadn't shared with me before, and maybe it's just that whole manly not wanting to admit you're scared thing. I don't know, but I thought that was really interesting. But the basement never bothered me as much as it bothered him. Everything I experienced was on this floor.
When did you first become what you would consider aware that something out of the ordinary might be going on?
I know it was months after we moved in. I want to say the odd the crib door being down in the middle of the night. I always want to say I've always had eerie feelings in basements, not necessarily this one more than anyone else's. But the crib door down always got us thinking, always got us wondering what could possibly do that. And, it just escalated over the past 10 months, for the most part, but since my second boy has been born, is when everything has just really got interesting.
But we had the experience where I was at the kitchen sink washing dishes, and it was just me and Finn in the house, and he was probably about 18 months old, up and walking and talking a little bit, and he had come to call every woman he knew Nina. And we didn't know where it came from, had no idea. Didn't matter if he called me Nina, he called his grandma's Nina, he called his babysitter Nina. Any woman who could do anything for him was Nina. So I'm standing at the kitchen sink, and he comes running through from the family room in the back going, Nina, 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 looking up at the air and grasping for somebody. And I just assumed it was me, and I turn around, and I see him doing that, yelling for Nina, and he just runs right past me like I wasn't even in the room, and comes running into the dining room. So I, being open to it and believing that children are a lot more open and sensitive to things that are going on, and I didn't want to, scare him off or tell him he wasn't saying anything. So I just walked up, and I'm like, who are you talking to, sweetheart? And he points to the other room, and he said, Nina. And I said, Nina? Who's Nina? And he went, Nina, and he pointed to her again, and then he looked kind of puzzled, and I said, well, where's Nina now? And he looked, and he went, I think he pointed to the other room, and I followed him through, but she was gone at that point. And I just thought it was really interesting that he was chasing somebody through the house that I couldn't see, and it's somebody named Nina, who would be a woman, in his life. This way is where I spend, the family room is where we spend all of our time, and when I get everybody to bed and I come and sit down and hang out, this is where I am. And this is where I would always be sitting, and the kitchen that we just walked through is where I would hear, it seemed like it was right in the middle of the kitchen where I would hear, at least 5, clump, 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 footsteps. And the last time that happened is the time it was so loud that it woke the dog up too. She was laying over here on the floor, and she woke up and went, "Rrr," and looked around to the kitchen doorway. And then also this is the room where all the little electric toys go off, which as a parent I don't know if that's something all parents experience, but
Any specific toys?
the dinosaurs would roar a lot. There was one I think we've thrown away since then, and there was a puppy. This guy, I think we actually finally turned him off because he was creeping us out there. But this is the dog. You have to squeeze him. You can feel the little mechanical device inside him that you have to squeeze to get it to go off. And right before, I guess it was after we'd been in touch with John, everybody was asleep. I was cleaning, and I was carrying some dirty dishes into the kitchen, and I got to the doorway, and the puppy was sitting over here in this corner, and all of a sudden it goes, "Peekaboo, I see you." And I'm like, oh, thanks a lot. That's really great. Out of everything you could say. And then it took me about 30 minutes of squeezing it, different parts, to finally get it to say it again. Because there for a while I thought, it doesn't even say that. But I did finally get it to say it again. And then when Finn was little, when he was yelling for Nina, I was standing here at the kitchen sink washing dishes. He was in the family room, and I hear him go, "Nina, Nina, Nina." So I turn around, expecting him to come running to me, but he goes running right past me, doing this, going, "Nina, Nina, 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 Nina," like this, runs right through these 2 rooms and stops here. So I come up and kneel down and ask him who he's talking to, and he points over to the fireplace, and he said, "Nina." And I said, "Is Nina still here?" And he said, and he pointed again and said, "Nina," and then I asked him where Nina went, and he walked over and pointed to the front door. Those were the kinds of things that happened to me, and it seemed to settle down. Like I said, it quit happening with the crib door, and that Nina thing happened, but not much else happened to me until after Beckett was born 10 months ago, and I've been home with him since we had him. I quit my job, and I've been staying at home. So I thought maybe it's just because I've been in the house more, but Steve was getting more and more scared of the basement, and I had started hearing footsteps in the family room where, trying to work and trying to stay home and do a job from home and all that, it's like always busy and always stressed and always doing something. And I would get the kids to bed and get Steve to bed, and 10 o'clock was my time to finish cleaning the house or get a little bit of work done or just put on my jammies and sit on the couch and relax. And It got to the point where at least a couple times a week, if I was sitting on the couch after 10 or 11 o'clock at night watching TV, I would hear footsteps in the kitchen. And the first few times it happened, I thought it was Steve, and then I just came to realize, well, no, you've just got, somebody taking a few steps through the middle of your kitchen, and they're not bothering me. It didn't scare me. I'm just like, okay, well, if you need anything, let me know. And so that has been going on. I don't remember exactly when it started after Beckett was born, but sometime within the last 10 months or so is when that started up. And finally, the footsteps were so loud one night that our dog woke up and, jerked up and turned her head to look to see who was coming through the doorway. And I jerked up and I thought, well, that's not the ghost. That's got to be Steve. I've never heard it that loud. And he was still tucked soundly in bed. So I'm like, I don't know what's going on, but I guess I kind of feel like I need a little bit of help because there is something going on. And the boys' room kind of creeped me out too, and I feel bad saying that since I made it my son's bedroom, and I didn't swap with them and sleep in the creepy bedroom myself, but it didn't seem to bother them, and there was a part of me that just figured it would follow them wherever they went, so it didn't really matter which room it was. I just figured they were more interested in the boys. But it's like I didn't like changing the baby at the crib with my back to the room, and I didn't like to even read books to Finn in bed. We'd put him to bed in our room most nights instead of being in their room. And it wasn't really anything I could put my finger on except for the room just kind of gave me the willies. And I think I attributed it also to knowing that it had been Lucille's bedroom, and even though she hadn't died in it, that, someone who had died had slept in that room. And so I chalked it up to my imagination. But one night I was in there and had been kind of, not feeling great in the room, and had to open the closet door to get something out for Beckett. And this was something that I didn't really share with anybody just because it was really scary and really just kind of struck me in my stomach, and I didn't really want to talk about it, and I wanted to just think it was my imagination. But I opened the closet door and I just felt this rush. It's like I can't say that I saw an apparition. It's like I saw it with my brain more than I saw it with my eyes, is the only way I can really describe it. But it was just this face just going, right in my face. And it was white and had dark, deep, sunken eyes, and just like it was jumping out at the closet at me, trying to scare me, and it kind of made me mad, and it kind of scared the poo out of me, and I thought, this is okay, this just isn't going to cut it. I need to do something for my children's sake, first of all, and that kind of presence just isn't welcome in my house. I don't want anybody in here. If it's Lucille and she's the grandma who used to live here and she wants to pat her around, that's fine, but if it's something that wants to be threatening, then it's time to do something about it. And this is the closet where the big scary face came out and freaked me out. Yeah, I mean, it's just nothing special, just an old closet. But as soon as I opened that door, it was just like it just kind of assaulted me, is what it felt like, just right in my face. So
I could go all into it about my personal experiences. Upstairs, not necessarily much of anything. Downstairs, get a lot of tingly, rising up the back, tingling feeling, feeling like 10,000 people are staring at me the minute I get to the basement, walking down the stairs, walking up the stairs. The worst and scariest experience I had was probably one of the first times I ever saw anything, and I don't even know when I actually saw, because it was pretty much unexplainable. I saw, sitting in my back room, a shadow pass in front of the door, pass in front of the wall opening, and I didn't think anything of it. Kept playing my game station, and probably within the next month I was back down there and had the exact same experience, except for I'm pretty sure I saw what I figured was a shadow. That was before Beckett was born, before my second was born. That was probably within a year of moving in here. the first year we lived in here, and that was it. It was it for the longest time. And then I was changing my water in my fish tank. I walked through a very potent, pretty sulfuric smell that was pretty much contained in one little tiny area, 3-4 feet round. And every time I passed through it probably 3 times, maybe 4 times, and the smell did not ever leave just that area, because it to me, I think it should branch off and then spread out through the basement. Well, it didn't. It stayed in one tiny little area, which so happened to be the area that Star picked up as being the resting spot of the girl. I don't remember her name, and that was probably the most eeriest feeling. I had one other experience sitting up against the fish tank, feeding them or something. I felt a rush. I'll explain as a rush through me, like something ran through me. Felt like it utterly and completely. It was kind of an energy pull. Felt like just something ran into me and then just sucked a lot of my air out, and it was done. It was done, and pretty much from those 2 experiences up to date, it has been very strange in that basement. Very strange in that basement. All right. It's not the biggest basement, but it's a little bit long. I'd spend a lot of time in our closet over here. Would get creepy feelings. Not all that bad. It's the exit to the outside of the house. I know I've walked in and got completely eerie feelings. Fine outside, everything's great outside. As soon as I walk in that door, it just feels completely uncomfortable. Completely uncomfortable. And the biggest and best part of the basement is over towards the fish tank. I had actually this actual vicinity, a bubble about this big is where my smell had occurred, and it was only in this area, not on this side, not on this side, not on this side, or not on this side. It was right here. Unbelievable smell. And which actually, this is the actual spot that Star had said that the woman had been buried, and the guy haunts. The doctor, or supposedly doctor, comes and messes. And this room back here is where I was calling my game room or the play room or whatever. And when I first noticed, I was sitting in this exact spot, had the TV directly in front of me, and had noticed right at the very last second I saw something pass in front of me, 8 feet away, 9 feet away, somewhere right around there. And I'd probably say a week or 2 after that experience, I was down here, and that's when I looked up and actually saw something moving. Not necessarily legs, not arms, nothing staring at me, but it was a mass that moved right in front of my face, and it was not shadows of any sort that I've ever experienced. I'd get creepy feelings in here and everything. Other than that, just having my back against the basement was just creepy, completely creepy. Up here working at my fish tank, and it feels like there's 10,000 people looking at me at all times.
Can we go back to the shadow for a moment?
Yeah.
When you say shadow, are you saying you're looking kind of like shadow on the wall, or?
That's when I thought, because everybody's house on this neighborhood has driveways, you get an odd vision of when a car pulls in or pulls out, even brake lights will send, because I have a window right over in the very, very front of my house, and it picks up reflections that have a tendency to push one image, which makes a shadow, like I have a weight bench down there, and if the light hits it at multiple angles, it makes it look like it's moving. Well, that's when I kind of thought happened the first time, and I want to say I got up and looked both ways and looked out my window, but I don't remember. That was before my fish tank was there, so it would have been easier to get to that window, and I would have looked out and been like, oh, there's no neighbors, nobody's pulling in or pulling out. I know the second time, I was 100% sure that it was not a car driving by, a police shining their lights, because that's happened a few times. But it was not when I saw. I saw a definite black moving, darker moving object right in front of my eyes. I mean, right in front of my eyes. It was, 6 feet, 7 feet, maybe even 8 feet away, and it was a solid shadow, like it had depth. It wasn't like most shadows. I would call it one-dimensional. It's on the ground and it's flat.
Right.
Well, this looked like it was somebody, a definite person,
Wow.
and it only took probably a half a second for it to happen. So I did not want to say, guarantee that was a person, but it was a very odd shadow. There was no possible way it was an outside shadow, light coming in, and yeah, that was creepy.
So it wasn't a shadow in what most people would consider, you have an image, a light, and the shadow cast on the wall.
This was in the middle of the room with, I'll say mass. It looked like it had mass. It was not a on the wall shadow, definitely, because it would have been too dark in the corner, and it would have been way too far away for me to get a real good image. But since it was in between me and the next wall, it was very strange, definitely strange.
Did you just kind of push it out of your mind, or what was your reaction to that?
If I remember correctly, I just shut the game off, shut the TV off, went upstairs. I probably drank 1 or 2 beers, and I'm like, nope, I'm done with down here. I'm done with down here. Because I can rule a lot of things out and say, I believe or don't believe in weird things, but this was something that I wanted out of my head immediately. I do not want to remember this moment, and, that was basically the start of a lot of things.
So I was thinking, I'd just smudge the house. I've heard about sage, but I didn't, really know what to do. And I thought, what, I don't really want to take this on by myself. I don't feel like I necessarily know enough to be able to protect myself and my family if we try to delve into this. So I just Googled St. Louis and paranormal and came up with the St. Louis Paranormal Research guys and sent them an email, and John emailed me back, and we started emailing, and then he called and we set up a time, and probably a month or so after I emailed him, we got them out here to try to help with it.
The night that I was here videotaping and such, as we drew to an end, you mentioned something to me that your wife, you hadn't even told your wife.
Mm-hmm,
What was it? Could you elaborate?
That night was kind of weird. I'm trying to remember which one.
I think what it was that I think you made an observation that men that went down there.
Oh, yeah. That I've had a handful of friends, even the neighbor. I don't want to say I've had lots of girls down there, but my sister, my stepmom, my mom, Amy, handful of her friends have been down in the basement, and probably 3 or 4 of my friends that were males, plus my neighbor, get the experience that I had feels like someone's watching. It feels like there's somebody ready to jump out from around the corner. You know, we have that perception that we can feel that there's somebody in the room, but not necessarily somebody. You just have that feeling there's something else here, and it's always staring at you. It always feels like it's staring. So I've had probably about out of the dozen or two male friends that I've had down there, 3 or 4 of them have picked up, the basement's kind of weird. and the last guy that told me that was about the time that we were really starting to get heavy activity, really, unexplainable stuff like the crib door dropping, the I guess that was probably right around the time that the construction, cribs was down, but it was up here when I had the only up here experience was the footsteps, because I was having construction going on up here, and I want to say one of my friends within that same period had felt something down there. I want to say so.
Okay, then of course we've got videotape of what happened that night.
Right.
How did you find the St. Louis Paranormal guys to be?
Oh, I loved them. I liked them from the second they walked in the door, and they were, friendly and intelligent, and but all, you could tell that they were really open to listening to what had happened to us, and they weren't here to judge us or make fun of us or tell us we were fruits, and conversely, they also weren't here to just jump in and say, okay, where are the ghosts? I know they're going to be here. They were still kind of scientific about it, and were open to investigating what had happened, but didn't walk in the door, saying they knew we were going to find something either. So I liked that, but they were great guys, and I kind of feel like we'll always be friends. When you go through something like this together, it's like you don't really forget each other and just walk away, is what it feels like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand.
Mm-hmm.
It's difficult to not develop kind of a quick friendship.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Now, did they spend the night here?
Well, Brian wasn't able to come that night, so a man named Tim, and I don't remember Tim's last name, who's a parapsychologist with, 30 years of experience in the field, came along that night. So they came on a Saturday night, and the neighbors were having their son's 18th birthday party, so our house is kind of always a hub of commotion anyway, but so they came in and they set their stuff up, and they set cameras up in the boys' room, and they set up, I think, a recorder in the kitchen to see if we could catch anything down there. And then John and Tim took their equipment down to the basement. So after we'd done that, we spent probably a couple hours setting up and talking and going through the house, showing them where everything had happened and filling Tim in on it. So then they went down to the basement, and we just kind of went about our normal business like there weren't 2 strangers we didn't know downstairs. And I'm like, Steve, is it really responsible of us to invite 2 men we've never met to come spend the night in our home? And he's like, I think it's fine. And I'm like, I know it is. But once they got in here, I'm like, that's really kind of odd to do that. But they were great guys, and it was just, John had been saying the whole time, and he's like, I don't know what Steve's problem is. Your basement's not spooky. It's not spooky at all. There's nothing wrong with your basement. And he had said that several times, and they finally came up, I guess it was between 1:30 and 2, and John walked in and he said, I take it back. Your basement is really creepy. And I'm like, okay. And Tim didn't go back down that night, which I thought was, the guy with 30 years experience was like, yeah, I'm not going back down there.
When I first came into the house, I felt like nothing was here. When I spent the night in the basement for a few hours, my thoughts have changed. There's definitely something here that's active. It messes with your emotions. Normally when something happens, you think it's your mind playing tricks on you, but this was a sense of dread, not a sense of panic, which happened at the moment of the second shadow figure actually being seen. So my thoughts are that there's something definitely here, and we'll eventually find out what it is and get rid of it. It was an email through our website about activity. They said that they had activity going on, and they wanted a cleansing. First off, that they were already fed up with it, and I emailed them back and got some of the information of what was going on, and then we, made an appointment to come by and check out the house and see and listen to some of their claims of what was going on, and it sounded interesting enough to come in and set up some cameras.
And your findings?
Yeah, there's definitely activity here. We were here for about 3.5, 4 hours. Our first night we set up cameras, and we had a couple personal experiences and a minor thing on tape that we can't explain. We're still open for suggestions of what it could be, because we're not saying it is actual activity, but it happened around the activity that's unexplainable.
Can you elaborate on the personal experiences?
Me and one of our other investigators were sitting in the basement, and there's a window, and there was a street light, and the light was actually hitting a weight set, like a Bowflex in the basement, and you could see the metal shining. It was about close to midnight, I would say, quarter to midnight, and on a Saturday, and I saw something block out the light on the Bowflex. So it wasn't from the window. And then I kind of whispered to the other guy. I said, there's something that's blocked out the light. And he kind of peeked over his left shoulder, and he could have sworn he saw a figure standing there. We both shined our flashlights. Nothing was there. And then as soon as we pulled our lights away, you could see the bar again. So we thought nothing of it. We just figured it was my eyes playing tricks, so on and so forth. We sat there for a good hour after that, and on our camera in the bottom right-hand corner, around a wall, you actually see this bright glowing orb, essentially, that comes around the corner and slowly makes its way meandering and down around the wall. A minute and 31 seconds later, the guy that's sitting to my left that can see into the basement actually saw a black shadow figure standing looking over its right shoulder at him, and he in turn got up, took a couple steps, it took off running, and then he in turn followed it and it disappeared. Personal experience, wasn't on the camera, can't verify it, but we have the orb, which they say happens around activity if it's unexplainable.